Next up, we have Santiago Siri. Santiago is a founding peer of Partido de la Red, which is a political party that aims to improve representation with candidates committed to online citizen requests. He's also been an advocate for Bitcoin since 2011, and in 2007 founded Popego, a pioneering big data research lab. His first book, Hacktivismo, was published in 2015 by Random House. Tonight, Santiago will tell us about Democracy.Earth, a Y Combinator-backed nonprofit working on a global effort to deliver an open source solution to online voting. So everybody, please welcome Santiago.
Good evening, guys. So usually by the end, when you release something, you are ready to make a demo, and actually we're on the very early days of the development of this. So many things won't work probably, as it should on any demo. All right. So Democracy.Earth. I will give you a little bit of what I've been working on for the last 4 years and what we're looking into the future and what we're actually building with Meteor these very days. So we started 4 years ago with the mission of hacking politics. And we started in Buenos Aires in Argentina. And our first attempt at trying to do this was to perform a very well-known hack that has been done throughout the history of civilization, that is the Trojan tactic, trying to change the system from within. So this was our first attempt, our first tactic. And the way we did it was the following way. We developed an open source software called DemocracyOS, a very simple application where you get informed, you debate and vote, kind of like a do-it-yourself Facebook. But this open source application also came with an offline component called Partido de la Red, literally a political party. And this political party has candidates that are committed to always vote in Congress according to what citizens decide on DemocracyOS. It was a radical approach, especially for Latin America and a city like Buenos Aires in Argentina, but we actually went out and did it. We literally built a Trojan horse. We campaigned in the streets of Buenos Aires. We went for elections in 2013. And we got 1.2% of the votes. The Partido de la Red made a very good first election for a very small party. It was a big success for us to get 1% of the votes. And since then, DemocracyOS, it was not enough to get the candidate elected, but we kind of got the software elected. DemocracyOS was implemented by the by the Congress, City Congress. All 16 parties agreed to present a bill on the platform, got the citizens engaged, and we started seeing how the software played out. DemocracyOS is a very simple app. It's developed in Node, MongoDB, and it was its main feature is the fact that it's open source. But its development throughout the last 3 years, it changed teams, and we had different teams working on it throughout all these years. But it led us to understand how we can do digital activism. We work with governments, federal governments, local governments, political parties, nonprofits. It was localized into 18 languages, has over 1,000 stars on GitHub. And it was a project that led us to understand a little bit about the intersection of politics and technology. But we identified our real enemy, corruption. Many stories about starting up a political party in Latin America. Just to name one, I was asked to pay a bribe to a federal judge in order to run for the 2015 elections in Buenos Aires. Obviously, we did not run because I was not willing to pay a bribe to a federal judge. But the key problem of corruption is something that went beyond my wildest, forecasts of how nasty the game really is. So, and also with DemocracyOS, we found some key flaws that needed to be addressed. The fact that any single person that actually controls the server running DemocracyOS, regardless of the fact that the application is open source, still whoever manages the server has a lot of impact and a lot of influence on how the application works. So we went out, we told our story to the world, we met a lot of politicians, but we built a healthy network of hacktivists in many, many countries. And last year, we received a call from Y Combinator to build a nonprofit here in Silicon Valley that really focused on the problem on the issue of democracy at a global scale. And that's where we started the Democracy.Earth Foundation. So now we're going with a different strategy. We're doing 10x improvement. What we need to figure out is how we do 10x improvement of government, how we can do governance in a digital way. And the interesting element for us is, we're going to focus on precisely voting. And the key thing about voting is that it's already the main interaction we do online. It's the main interaction we do on Facebook, on Twitter, on any kind of social network that we use daily. But the interesting thing about the new wave of decentralized ledgers and these new technologies is that now we have an opportunity to work with a technology that its main feature, and I think this is probably the most interesting element to us about the Bitcoin blockchain, is that it's an incorruptible database. Databases are the institutional reality, and whoever manages and gets the rights to write those databases has a lot of power. The fact that we can work now with an incorruptible database, or a database that is extremely expensive to corrupt, is a very interesting opportunity, so we can start imagining new ways of building institutions, doing governance online, and doing voting online. So that's what we're building today is focused on 3 key things that I want to talk to you about. The first key thing is identity. Identity is very centralized. We use passports to move from one nation state to the other, or we use passwords to move from one corporation to the other. The beauty of a technology like the Bitcoin blockchain is that it really can deliver a new protocol that can put our identity keys in the supercomputer we use every day, or smartphones, rather than delegating that power to a centralized authority. And this is very important when you speak about voting, because what differentiates an election from a survey or a poll is proper identity verification. And identity verification also is, we have to keep in mind that when you are expressing political preferences online in certain countries like Venezuela or Cuba, you run a risk of losing your job if you are identified. So the right to manage your anonymity online is also extremely important. The other key element that we are working with is legitimacy. Who gets to count the votes? Who watches the watchman? Nation states have the central authority that gets to count the votes. Corporations have the servers that get to count the likes. But if we use a distributed, decentralized ledger like the Bitcoin blockchain, every single voter can count the votes of every other voter without even requiring access to our technology, to our apps, to our servers, to our software. So we are open sourcing the element that needs to get open source. Open source is not simply about literally opening the source code of a piece of software, but it's about opening the black box that has the risk of actually corrupting the system. And the black box in democratic systems is who gets to count the votes. So using the Bitcoin blockchain, and we're also exploring smart contracts with Ethereum, has very interesting, brings very interesting legitimacy to the system. And finally, representation. Traditional politics, we have reality show politics for nation states, with literally reality show stars actually, running for the top seat of the game, and fake voting that has no institutional impact whatsoever. What we're working with is, this idea of delegating power to your peers, delegating voting power to a friend, to someone you know, to someone you already trust, and work in a more dynamic way of representation. So, DemocracyOS, you can check it out. It's out there, but it has a big flaw. If you go to the demo we have actually on DemocracyOS.org, you will see that there are, most of these things here are tests, basically testing the app. And there's not much interaction with it. Most of these are just people testing how they can use the app. So what we need to do is something that really, is able to engage users when they generate the content and engage with the app. So this is what we're working on right now, and this is not even 0.1. This is the very early days of what we're doing. But the great thing about Meteor is that we were able to generate a very simple interface right away. So this is an editor, as you can imagine. I can, really change the interface really, really fast. Automatically saves the information on the database. The editor has, we're using some libraries that enable kind of medium-like editing capabilities. The idea of tags is really important to the system because we are doing delegation based on tags. You delegate power based on a certain set of topics. So we did a very simple, straightforward tag editor. This is also adaptive, works on mobile devices, so it's thought to work properly on mobile devices. And then the ballot design. We were able to implement a super fast search engine. If I can, for example, look here for real incremental search, I type just 2 words and I add an option to this ballot. These options are other decisions that are part of the system. Let's see, Julian Assange, or why not, our good friend Donald Trump. And we just add the options and you design a ballot and then this is sent into the system. We are in the very early days of developing this. We're looking at certain technologies that can help us integrate with the Bitcoin blockchain. A particular piece of technology that we're working with is Blockstack, blockstack.org. It's a protocol for decentralized identity and decentralized DNS management. So it's really interesting, and we're looking into integrating our application with this in order to do identity authentication. And you can visit Democracy.Earth. This is our current landing site, and leave your information there. And you are looking to build a team that can help us develop this technology in the best possible way. And you can also look for us on Twitter. Thank you, and if you have any questions.
Questions for Santiago?
Using a block cipher to identify the votes or count the votes for candidates or both?
Blockstack is it registers identities, and you have a private key that connects to the public key of the identity that is stored it uses a virtual chain that is connected to the blockchain. The idea is that you get to decide if you want the votes. We won't be connecting them to identities. You get to decide if you want to encrypt the vote of your identity.
Signing vote with my identity in the blockchain, correct?
Yeah, but if you want to vote anonymously, we want to give you that option as well. We want to put that option in the user.
You mentioned delegative democracy. Can you explain like what that means in contrast to like representative democracy or like a democratic republic, or just generally what the political ideology behind this?
Great question. So, what do we mean? What kind of democracy we're talking about? Direct democracy, representative democracy. So. A typical thing that is being talked a lot in many civic environments is the idea of liquid democracy. This is a model where you vote directly on issues or you delegate your voting power to someone. But to us, the view we have about this is that democracy is always a work in progress. It's always an incomplete idea. If a democracy were an absolutist idea, it would be a totalitarian ideology just like all the other ideologies. It's the one exception. The key thing about democracy, when you look at the origins of it, is that the Greeks spoke about agora. And the word agora etymologically means thinking or speaking with others. And it's usually an antonym of making war. And the beauty of that idea is that it has been evolving throughout history, the history of civilization. And what we are trying to really understand here is what democracy means on the digital age, on the internet age. And democracy in software form has the possibility of interaction in many, many more ways of the traditional democratic systems that we have seen in our governments, in our countries, and in our political systems. And I think Wikipedia is a great example of a democratic environment that has very, very interesting dynamics and also has very interesting play out of power. What we're trying to do is to provide a toolkit that can help any kind of institution, small or large, to organize their decision-making process with a governance tool like this, where you can see the decisions being made, where you can provide accountability for the decisions that were made, and bring more transparency to organizations of all sizes.
Great project, congratulations.
Thank you.
I wonder, which country do you think that it could really make the biggest difference in first?
So we were lucky to work in many different countries, in many different contexts, local level, national level. My main concern is that I work with a lot of politicians. I would not work again with politicians. The key thing, and they're reptilians. I'm very sure about that. The key thing is to reach the citizens. The best piece of civic technology that we have seen so far is actually Twitter and Facebook. It's the technologies that we use every day and we engage with every day. So it's key to understand how we can reach the bottom line of it, that is citizens. In our experience, we see that in the developing world, there's a more urgent need for change because traditional institutions just simply not deliver what they need to deliver. So I think it's no coincidence that we actually started in Buenos Aires in Argentina, which is incredibly very corrupt. I'm very ashamed to say that. But it's because of that citizens are looking and flocking into new alternatives. In our experience, we had work in Mexico, we had work in Venezuela, in Chile, across all of Latin America. Brazil is actually very big for us. Also, we've seen implementations of our software, of DemocracyOS, in France, in Hungary, in Tunisia. Different uses, specific project that lasts 1 week to 3 weeks. You see how it unfolds and how it's being tried to use for one side or the other. But that's why with Democracy.Earth, we want to go one step further and try to figure out how we can not only do voting, but because we are doing voting, actually, you have to figure out how to do institutions in a digital way and identity in a decentralized way. And I think that could be a big threat to politicians.
We've got time for one more question.
Over there.
Yeah, I was wondering about, I like the fact that you can control your identity and anonymously manage your votes in an incomparable way. But what's to stop me from creating multiple identities?
Great question. The identity issue is one of those things that keeps me awake every night. That's why institutions are very important, because institutions define the scope of how many identities they will assign to their voters. There are institutions that have 4 voters, and it's only those 4 voters that get the keys to actually engage in the decisions that belong to these institutions. And there are other institutions that have 60,000 members, a community. We're actually working with a small island called Guernsey between the UK and France. And in this island is really looking forward to innovate with blockchain-related technology. And it's an island with 60,000 members, and we can really try to see, there will be, a funny story about that. I met a politician once sent to me an email asking me for some documents, and I said, well, I will send them to you. And he says, send it to this address. And the address was a completely different name. I said, who is that guy? And he says, oh, I have 15 different identities. I have 15 aliases. And I'm like, wow, what does have to happen to you to just have 15 fake email accounts just because? And that's, that definitely will happen. That's why limiting the assignation, limiting the keys that an organization gives to the voters and structuring the organization the right way is very important. And to us, this is a whole new field. It's not very easy to develop decentralized applications. A lot of rules are being rewritten, but we're very excited. Meteor led us to get to work on the user experience really, really very fast, very well. I'm a big fan of JavaScript, and learning a lot as we get to understand how to work with the Bitcoin blockchain. All right.
Thank you very much.